true? Is everyone burnt out? What does burnout
Maybe?
mean?
The short answer is maybe. I'm not going to be able to diagnose everyone in the world right now. But I do think that there is a penchant right now for talking about burnout, for using burnout in that buzzwordy kind of way. And it's really important to know what burnout is and what it isn't. And one of the things that it isn't is just being really stressed out.
Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell, and today we have an absolutely wonderful guest with us, Marissa, who's here to talk about all things burnout. And we have committed to keeping this to our normal 15 minutes, but we may need a second episode. We'll see. Described by some as the Miss Rachel for adults, Marissa Badgley is a globally recognized work culture transformation expert and facilitator with a dynamic background in organizational psychology, leadership development, education, conflict resolution, group dynamics, and social work. So first of all, so accomplished. I sadly do not know anything about Miss Rachel, so I'm really hoping that I might learn a little bit more about that connection today. All right, Marissa, we met in the most fun way. We were connected by someone who thought that we were two humans that should know each other. And in that first meeting, I think you thought we were connected in a different way. And next thing I knew, I was joining Dreamers and Doers.
Yeah, amazing. The world is small and it's good to be connected with good humans no matter how they come to us.
How they stumble upon you.
Yeah.
It definitely changed my trajectory. So just to tell the listeners a little bit more about you, Marissa's the founder of Reloveution, a small business that leverages the magic of humanity to strengthen teams and deepen leadership impact. So in short, she is making workplaces make sense for humans, right? We are humans who work, not people who work. Since 2019, Marissa has worked with 150 plus companies and tens of thousands of current and emerging leaders around the world, facilitating transformational learning, community experiences, propelling humans, teams, and entire organizations towards excellence, justice, and love. Marissa, that is a really big goal. How do you keep from burning out?
Well, when I started my organization, I committed to not replicating the harmful patterns and paradigms from my former workplaces, which meant working with really good coaches and really good therapists to make sure that I was keeping myself sane, setting really good boundaries, and creating structures that supported me as a human first rather than thinking about the business first. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yes, I think it's so important when we leave to start our own companies that we don't actually replicate what we were running away from. But unfortunately, we're often conditioned that that's the way things are supposed to be. So burnout is a bit of a buzzword. I think I mean, if I see one more TikTok trend on burnout, but it seems like everyone keeps saying they're burnt out, right? Or that they're on the verge of burnout. We were even talking about that at the very beginning of this call before we started recording. Is it true? Is everyone burnt out? What does burnout mean?
Maybe? The short answer is maybe. I'm not going to be able to diagnose everyone in the world right now. But I do think that there is a penchant right now for talking about burnout, for using burnout in that buzzwordy kind of way. And it's really important to know what burnout is and what it isn't. And one of the things that it isn't is just being really stressed out. So, stress is a completely normal human experience, and it can be actually really helpful, really beneficial for productivity, creativity, all of the things that we know are important in workplaces. Burnout happens when stress becomes unmanaged and unmanageable, and it results in physical, psychological, emotional, social deterioration. And that happens over time and is really the result of just not taking care of it when we feel that initial, very natural stressor. So it's really important to close these stress cycles. But we are living in a time when people are really, really stressed and having a hard time finding the time and energy to manage the stress that they're experiencing. And that stress is internal, but it's also part of our organizational ecosystems. It's also part of the larger world. And so we're experiencing this collective stress too, which I do think is adding to a collective sense of burnout. But it is preventable and it is healable, and there are things that we can do about it.
Right. We were just talking. For me, I think one of the signs for me when I know that I'm approaching burnout is I just feel less creative or completely sort of unmotivated. And you get to that point where you just feel like if one more thing happens, you don't have the capacity to handle it. Sometimes my EMDR therapy does help with that. And sometimes when it doesn't, that's when I know that it's time to take maybe 24 hours, without the phone. But what are some other sort of signs of burnout that people kind of miss if they're not in tune with themselves and they don't know what those cycles look like?
Yeah, so I think that the first piece is just affirmation to you and your story and me and my story in terms of when we're experiencing that lack of creativity or lack of motivation, it's our body actually doing its job. So when we have these stressors stored up in our bodies feel like they're in danger, that they need to be able to preserve energy for the fight ahead. And so one of the things that I tell people to look out first is do you feel like you're compensating and saving energy subconsciously? So that might look like increased apathy. It might look like lack of motivation. It might look like indifference or just wanting to sleep all the time. And all of those things could be symptoms of lots of different things. But the important thing biologically is that it is our body signaling to us that it is saving energy for the fight ahead. And if we do not address it in that moment, then it spirals out of control really, really quickly. And so for me, that landed me in my last role in the hospital 3 times in 6 months, like convinced I was dying, with heart palpitations, severe gastrointestinal distress, all sorts of things that were incredibly painful, demoralizing, distracting from my work. And ultimately, when I wound up getting a diagnosis after a long stretch of time, what they found was that there was a part of my small intestine that was actually rotting and was like the
Oh
condition
no.
of like an 80-year-old person when I was 30. Um, and the only reason it happens is stress. And it still took me 6 more months to quit my
To
job.
quit? Oh no.
It's like, right? And so this is what we do. We're conditioned into these cycles and like narratives of we need to martyr ourselves. We need to work really hard. We have this work ethic that we do not leave at the door, and we perpetuate it. So I think that one of the things I wish I knew then were some of those mini warning signs. So it could be being more irritable than usual. It could be feeling really, really tired. It could be withdrawing from things that you love or not doing the things that you love. But every person's journey is different. And very often, people who are experiencing burnout are the last to realize they're experiencing burnout. And so one of the tips and tricks that I give is like have an accountability partner who knows what your individual warning signs are. My husband is my rock in
I
this
was
way.
just about
So
to say, yeah.
he's got a list of things that he's allowed to say, hey, you're responding differently than I know is your best self. um, Perhaps you need to take a break, or you need to recalibrate and think about what's causing additional stress right now. And we've have protocols for that so it doesn't feel like I'm feeling confronted. But having that accountability partner, whether it's a member of your team, whether it is a member of like a professional community or a family member, can be incredibly helpful because everybody's warning signs are a little different and there's no one size fits all solution.
I wish so. My husband and I probably need some protocols because that poor man will say, I think you're stressed. You shouldn't do this. And I'll be like, what do you mean? Of course I'm not stressed. I can do it. It's no problem. And
Right. But there's something in that too, right? That we have so much shame about the fact that we carry these
Exactly.
stressors. And that's something that is a problem in our culture in general, is that, okay, if I'm like fighting back about being stressed when I know that
I'm
I'm
actually stressed.
stressed, perhaps there's something there that we need to challenge and really think about, how do we support ourselves in that moment and be like, stress is a normal part of life. If I don't manage it, I am going to have, there are going to be severe consequences. So we have
And
to do something
something,
about it.
right, and something sometimes just has to be by the wayside, right? It cannot, everything cannot be a burning raging fire at the same time, although the world does try to tell us that that is in fact true. So what are some small doable strategies that someone could use today, kind of taking even from listening to this episode, where they could start healing and maybe preventing burnout even, um, even if they can't necessarily take a vacation, right? So a lot of people listening might be solopreneurs, or might be, you know, kind of the cog that is making their company work and might not be able to take time off. So what could they do to kind of help mitigate this stress so it doesn't lead to burnout?
Yeah. So in 30 seconds or less, I'm not going to be able to give all of the answers, but anyone can reach out to me at
There
any
you go.
point. Something that feels really important to remember is that when we are at our most burnt out, our nervous systems are in overdrive. And so the first step is to take one tiny step towards recalibrating your nervous system back towards stasis, not even back towards thriving, right? It's like, how do we get back to just stability, stasis, health, neutrality, in terms of our bodies not telling us that we are at immediate risk. And one of the ways that we get this really wrong oftentimes is thinking that we need to take time off, or that we need to take a long period of time off.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I know is a very common experience is we unplug for vacation, right? We go on this beautiful, amazing vacation for a week, and then we come back to our inbox the following Monday,
Yeah.
and we feel the same level of stress as we did before we left,
Maybe
right?
more.
Maybe more, because the inbox is in overdrive. All of the problems, if you actually turned off, right, there's all sorts of things that are now surfacing for you. And that's a classic example of us not actually doing the healing work during the time off. So we don't need an entire week or 2 weeks or several months to be able to rewire our nervous systems. It happens when we experience moments of awe. So, like, just go outside and watch a sunset
Mm-hmm.
and let yourself be there. Creating art, any kind of emotional expression. So, we get a lot of flack often for crying, but crying is one of the best ways to heal our nervous systems.
Sometimes you just need a good cry.
We need to cry. We need to laugh. We need to scream. One of the ways we hold on to stress is by keeping that all bottled up inside of us. And so just like expelling emotion is a really great way to tell our nervous systems that we're a-okay, we're gonna okay, we're safe. Um, Resting, but like meaningful
Like
rest that's
actual
not
rest.
attached
Not,
to
yeah.
screens. And really thinking about what lights your soul on fire, right? And so if that's playing with your kids, or hugging your dog, or going for a long walk, doing yoga, again, watching that sunset, there's no magic formula for healing from burnout, but knowing what lights you up. And if you can imagine your brain in an MRI machine, like, what do you imagine would like make it fire in all of the beautiful, like, sparky ways when we see those things on the internet? Do that. And sometimes it only takes 5 minutes as that proactive strategy of managing the stress before it gets to that burnout crisis stage. Once we get into actual burnout, which again is that debilitating physical and psychological exhaustion, it's really hard to heal. I had to take 3 months off of doing absolutely nothing work related in order to feel like I was anywhere close to healing. And I would say that my body didn't really catch up for another year. So prevention is the most important strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then being really attuned to what you need. If you get to that point where your body, your mind, your brain are shutting down, take the time that you need to do the healing and know that you deserve that time, because we are human beings and it's possible to heal, but we cannot do it without giving ourselves the time and grace and space and releasing the guilt and shame about getting
Yeah.
here to begin with, right? There's nothing wrong with you. And yet there's so many narratives about what's wrong with us if we have to take a break. One of the people closest to me in my life is like, stress is something, and negative thoughts are things that you can control. Just like stop thinking them, right? And it's
Right.
like, no, we
It's
can't
not
just wait for
exactly how it
next
works.
quarter. It's not how it works. And recognizing how it works and giving each other space for healing and permission to do that healing is a big paradigm shift that I'm fighting for, because I really like, I want to prevent what happened to me from happening to anybody else. And I will, that's a hill I'll die on.
I think it's a hill worth maybe not dying on, but it's
Yeah.
definitely something worth championing. I think we also have to think about what we're modeling to other people in our world, in our orbit, right? So when we're trying to take on all these things and do them all very well, we may think that's a badge of honor, but in reality, we're teaching everyone around us, the children in our lives or other people, who are looking up to us, that that's acceptable and that they should try and accomplish everything at the cost of their own, personal well-being or perhaps their health, which is not
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah, the martyrdom complex is real, but the problem with martyr stories is that the martyr ends up dead in all of them. And so we don't, that we need everyone alive. Like we need everybody's strengths and gifts. Like this is something that we really need, and it can't be a badge of honor. And I'll share one more like tiny story is I took a sabbatical in Q4 of last year. So it was my 5-year business
I watched,
anniversary.
by the way, with such happiness for you that you were doing it and a small bit of jealousy. I'm not going to lie.
So, if you are a person who's like, wow, how could you take 3 months off? You can take 3 months off. I spent a large portion of the period leading up to it with so much fear about losing momentum, with so much guilt around like how much privilege I have to like be able to take this amount of time off. With so many voices in my head that people were judging me, and that what you just shared, like I was looking on with awe and a little bit of jealousy. That's actually the story that people had. Like I so admire this. And it's actually funny. I'm doing some coaching one-on-one with two people right now on planning for and maximizing their sabbatical time
Mm-hmm.
because they watched that journey unfold for me. And it's been so incredibly powerful to help challenge those limiting beliefs. And like, no, like it's okay. Just because it's not what people normally do doesn't mean that it's not okay to take that time to take care of yourself. You come back better. I'm coming off of one of the best quarters I've had in my business. Momentum didn't slow down. I was able to amp up because my brain freed up for the
Right.
first time in many years. And I got to be creative again and do the things that I loved. And I came back feeling really good. I wish there were 3 more months, like honestly. But it's possible to take these breaks, and I think it should become more of what we do.
Yep. I agree. So, how can people find you if this has resonated with them and they feel like chatting with you could be sort of the catalyst for them, to kind of change and reshape how they are viewing their stress or how they're feeling? What's the best way
Yeah.
to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty sure that in the notes,
Show notes we will
my
have. Yep.
website will be there. You can book an absolutely no questions asked connection call with me. I'm very happy to talk to anybody. Again, this is my heart work. This isn't about capitalizing on anyone's distress. It's really about helping people find their own healing. I believe we all deserve it. We all need it. And there's a pathway to it for all people. And so book a connection call with me, get on my newsletter, and I also offer burnout blueprint sessions. So if you feel like you are in the throes of burnout or at risk of burnout, let's just sit down for an hour and figure out how to rewire your nervous system for this moment in time in your particular context. Um, I'm here as a support. Follow me on LinkedIn, and together we can make it all a little bit better. I do believe that.
I believe that too. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for joining our May Mental Health Awareness Month episode series for Managed Chaos Podcast. We really appreciate it. Hopefully this has been really helpful to you. Please join in for the rest of our episodes. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube or anywhere where you listen to your podcasts.